Welcome to Closet Thoughts with Brihat. Today is the 1st of April, and we're going to talk about everyone's favorite subject, death. So, in the ancient text of the Bhagavad Gita, which I've talked about many times, this book right here, Krishna is talking to his friend Arjuna. Arjuna is a warrior, and Krishna is his friend and charioteer. So, Krishna is driving his chariot, and Arjuna instructs Krishna to lead him into the middle of the two massive armies which are assembled. It's kind of a battle between good and evil. Amazingly epic scene, part of a much larger story, and the Gita is just the essential wisdom of this large story called the Mahabharata, which is, as far as I understand, the greatest and longest epic of all time. Much longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey, much longer than the Bible, much longer than any of these texts. And so, in the Gita, it begins with Arjuna starting to get concerned because he sees on the other side of the battlefield his friends, his family members, and many people who he holds very dear to his heart. And he freaks out and drops his bow, and he doesn't want to fight. And so, Krishna instructs him in the science of self-realization. And Krishna describes who is he really? So Arjuna is worried about killing his friends and family members because he's a warrior, and this is his dharma, this is his duty in life, is to fight. Because he's upholding dharma. He is fighting for higher purposes, fighting for a better world. It goes much deeper, but that's just the basic explanation. And so Krishna explains that you don't actually need to worry so much because you're not actually going to kill anyone on the battlefield. Only bodies will be killed. We need to understand who actually the self is in those bodies. And so when you're fighting on a battlefield and you're fighting for dharma, then you're actually, when you're fighting for Krishna, then you are not on the mundane platform. And so Krishna is trying to instruct him as his spiritual teacher in what is actually happening. So Arjuna is kind of blinded to the reality of life, just like all of we are. So we might be worried during this crisis time that our people we know, maybe loved ones, are contracting illness, and we're concerned about their well-being. And of course, we should be concerned with their physical well-being, but we must understand who this person really is. If we're attached to a limited, temporary, material body or personality, then we're missing the point. We're missing the essential spiritual knowledge. And so Krishna goes on, he continues to describe that we don't need to worry about the death of others because ultimately we're all eternal beings and we won't be killed. Because the spiritual energy which comprises us and comprises God is an unchanging, eternal energy which is completely unaffected by all material elements. There is nothing in material energy that can affect us as spiritual beings. Krishna describes we can't be burned by fire, we can't be withered by the wind, we can't be moistened by water, we can't be touched by any of this. Even the subtle material elements, which Krishna describes as mind, intelligence, false ego, none of these things can touch us at all. We're completely transcendental to all of this material energy. And if we can understand this, then we can understand what our real duty in life is, beyond any of the temporary relationships in this world, the temporary jobs, temporary duties, obligations. We have an eternal dharma, an eternal duty, and this is in our relationship with God. And as I've emphasized before, the God I'm speaking of, Krishna, is not a sectarian God. He has many names, and some people call him Yahweh or Allah and Rama. So this is not a sectarian thing at all. So Krishna even explains from the scientific perspective we don't need to worry about death. Because from a materialistic perspective, if all we are is material chemicals, then why should we lament the loss of chemicals? Nobody gets concerned about losing a bag of chemicals in a laboratory. And so if that is all we are, why should we actually lament the death of a body, a material body? And so from many different perspectives, Krishna describes that death is not something we need to be unnecessarily worried about, because it's just a simple fact of life. Everyone who is born, he says, will die at one point, and for those who are dead, birth is certain. And so this is just the fact of the matter he describes, this process of reincarnation, of movement through different forms, and how he instructs Arjuna simply just to do his duty and to not lament, not get caught up in worrying about the loss of a body, the loss of a temporary relationship. And again, this doesn't mean that we're cold-hearted. This just means that we need to understand who the person actually is, who we think we love. So if we're simply attached to a body, which is always changing, or a personality, which is always changing and temporary, then we're going to be unnecessarily in distress and anxiety because we're simply in illusion, not realizing who the person in the body actually is. And so this is the main point I wanted to share, is that we don't need to worry about death in the way that everyone is worrying about it in this materialistic world, because it's not the end. In fact, death is just the beginning of new birth. And we need to understand how we can actually influence what happens after the leaving of this body. And through our different duties in this lifetime, we create our own future. And there are many different destinations one can go, and none of them are eternal in the material world. There are many different nice places to go, not so nice places, animal bodies, plant bodies, human bodies, higher human bodies, many different forms of life we can take on. And none of them are eternal. They're all just a temporary, dreamlike experience. And when we need to what we really need to understand in life is that we are not from this material world. We're actually from the spiritual energy, the spiritual world. And this is the eternal foundation of all that exists, the absolute truth. This world is just a world of relative truths. And the more we can understand this, the more we don't worry so much about the temporary comings and goings of this world. The dreamlike nature of this world is just the reality. Death is just the reality. And when we understand what death really means, we don't need to worry so much. So I hope this helps and makes some sense. Please let me know if you have any questions or points of clarification, and I'd be very happy to engage further. Thank you very much for watching. Hare Krishna.